Why was everyone ignoring her at the briefing table? The room was alive with energy, paper maps spread wide, digital screens flashing enemy positions, men trading plans like playing cards. Yet Marine Corporal Maya Rodriguez sat in the back corner, her silence unnoticed. She'd been in the unit for 8 months now. 8 months of trying to prove herself to people who had already decided what she couldn't be. Shadow Walker, that's what they called her. Not because she moved silently, but because she followed in the shadows of others. Every time her hand went up in a meeting, it came down unseen. Every suggestion became a joke before it became a thought. Every skill she'd honed in training dismissed before it could be tested. And still she showed up, every day, every drill, every firing range session long after the others had gone home. The mission briefing that morning had been straightforward, at least on paper. A joint operation with SEAL Team 9. Locate an insurgent convoy moving through the Korangal Mountains. Intercept, extract intelligence, and exfil before sunrise. Standard objectives. Clean, predictable, but nothing in that valley had ever been simple. Her eyes traced the terrain outlines on the digital map. High ridgelines, deep valleys, crosswinds that could shift bullets midair. It was the kind of landscape that punished arrogance and rewarded patience. She saw what others didn't. A natural vantage point to the east, 1,300 meters away, perfect overwatch line, hidden behind a ridge of jagged rock. She raised her voice softly. "Sir, if we post a sniper up here, we can." The laughter came before she finished. "That ridge, you'll pass out halfway up," someone said. "Steep as hell, no cover. Leave the tactics to people who actually fire rifles, Rodriguez." The words slid off her face like cold rain. She didn't argue. She just nodded, closed her notebook, and took a quiet breath. Inside, though, a storm was forming, small, silent, but sharp. That night, while others slept, she was on the range again. Breathing slow, counting heartbeats, adjusting for wind with micro-movements that would look like stillness to anyone else. She remembered her grandfather's voice, gravelly, gentle, and unshakable. "Nieta, you don't need many shots in life, but the ones you take make them count for everything." He taught her that in the high country of Colorado, 2 miles above sea level, where air was thin, snow came early, and patience was the only weapon that mattered. Those hunts weren't about killing. They were about quiet, about becoming invisible until the mountain itself accepted you. Maya carried that into her service, but the core wasn't a mountain, it was a noise, and she didn't fit in. By the time deployment orders came, she was assigned to communications and rear security, not because she wasn't capable, but because no one wanted to gamble a mission on the quiet one. Now here she was, 6,000 miles from home, sitting beside a radio set, listening to her brothers-in-arms walk into a kill zone she'd predicted hours earlier. At first it was routine, short bursts of chatter, position updates, then chaos. Alpha team taking contact. Bravo under fire, multiple hostiles. Charlie, we've got RPGs coming in from all sides. Her headset filled with panic, gunfire, breathing, static. Maya froze. She could hear the shift, the sound soldiers know too well, when control breaks, when plans become instinct. Staff Sergeant Martinez's voice cut through the storm. "Viper 7 to base, we are surrounded. Repeat, surrounded. Heavy fire from all directions, requesting immediate evac." The reply came colder than the mountain air. "Viper 7, negative. Weather conditions make air support impossible. Hold position until dawn." Dawn, 8 hours away. A silence followed that was worse than the noise. You could feel the realization moving through the radio waves. They weren't getting out. Someone whispered over comms, "We won't last 45 minutes." Maya looked at her rifle, the Barrett M82 she'd fought to qualify on. Too heavy, they'd said. Too much recoil for her frame. She'd spent years mastering its rhythm, learning how to let recoil breathe through her shoulder instead of fighting it, how to make each bullet not a shot, but a statement. She looked toward the east ridge, the same one they'd laughed about. She knew what that high ground offered, line of sight over the entire valley, but it was a near-vertical climb, a death wish under normal conditions. Her heartbeat slowed. Her fear whispered logic, stay put, follow orders, don't get killed trying to play hero. Her anger whispered truth, if you stay here, you'll listen to them die. Her grandfather's words came again, soft but firm. When everyone says it's over, that's when your shot matters most. She made her decision. She keyed the radio. Communications maintaining position, she said, a lie, clean and necessary. Then she slung her rifle, grabbed her pack and stepped into the darkness. The first part of the climb was brutal. Loose rock, cold air, the kind of incline that punished hesitation. Her boots slipped twice, scraping her knees. Wind howled through the pass, carrying the distant rhythm of gunfire. Each shot below was a heartbeat, a life trying to hold on. Her body screamed for rest, but something deeper kept her moving, a conviction forged not in pride but in quiet defiance. Every insult, every smirk, every time she'd been told you can't, now served as fuel. She climbed higher. The mountain air thinned. Her breathing became measured, 3 seconds in, 4 seconds out. She reached a narrow ledge halfway up, crouched, scanning below. Through the distant flashes, she saw the SEAL team's position shrinking. Fires burned where ammo crates had exploded. She could hear Martinez's voice, cracked with exhaustion. All units prepare for final defensive positions. We're almost out of options. Maya pressed her back to the rock, feeling its cold pulse. She wasn't supposed to be here. Every rule said to stay low, stay rear, stay unseen. But she had learned something over the years. Orders protect structure, not always people. She climbed again, hands bleeding now. The rifle felt heavier with every meter, but when she finally reached the ridge, the world below unfolded like a map of chaos. From here she could see everything, every muzzle flash, every movement, every shadow sliding between the rocks. And there, the machine gun nest tearing through her team's perimeter, the one no one could reach. She set up her bipod on the cold stone, slid the scope cap open. Wind speed, direction, temperature, she calculated it all instinctively. Her finger rested on the trigger, but her heart hesitated. The distance was long, the wind unpredictable. One wrong shot and she'd reveal her position and doom them all. Her breath steadied. "Make it count," she whispered. She squeezed. The rifle cracked through the mountains like thunder. And for a second, nothing happened. Then silence. The machine gun went still. Down below, heads turned. Martinez froze mid-command. Who the hell fired that? No one answered. Then another shot. Another flash, another silence. The enemy line began to hesitate. Confusion rippled through them. The sound was coming from above, from nowhere they expected. Maya adjusted her scope, shifted 2 meters right, fired again, and again. Each shot was calm, precise, deliberate, like a heartbeat counting down toward dawn. She moved between rocks after every few shots, never staying in one spot long enough for counter-snipers to zero in. She became the mountain itself, the wind, the echo, the ghost. For the first time, her nickname made sense. Shadow Walker. Below, the SEALs regrouped, disbelief turning into courage. Martinez's voice came through comms again, strained but alive. "Guardian Overwatch, identify yourself." Maya exhaled into the mic. "Overwatch active. Move northeast toward the compound. I'll cover your advance." He didn't recognize the voice at first, but the calmness, the authority was impossible to ignore. They moved. Shot after shot, Maya dismantled the enemy's advantage. She took out machine gunners first, then spotters, then anyone trying to flank the SEALs. The fight that had seemed lost became coordinated again, precise, methodical. Through her scope, she saw the rhythm of hope return to the men below. The panic faded from their movements. They began to believe in something unseen, something they couldn't name. By the time she hit her 21st target, dawn was beginning to bruise the horizon. But the enemy wasn't retreating yet. Their commander, a tall figure near the ridgeline opposite, was shouting orders, rallying his fighters. Maya adjusted her scope. Rangefinder read 1,350 meters. Wind variable, angle downhill, target moving. Impossible shot. She inhaled deeply, the kind of breath that carried both fear and faith. And for a heartbeat, she saw her grandfather standing on a snowy ridge in Colorado, smiling under that old hunting cap. Make it count. She squeezed. The rifle kicked, echoing across the valley. A second later, the enemy commander fell. The radio chatter below erupted. They're retreating, they're falling back. The valley grew still, only the wind remained. Maya didn't cheer. She just exhaled a long, trembling breath, the kind that carries everything you've been holding for years. Her hands were shaking, not from fear, from release. When Martinez's voice came again, it was softer. Guardian Overwatch, whoever you are, thank you. Maya lowered her rifle. The world was quiet again. And for the first time since she joined the Corps, silence didn't mean being unseen. It meant being heard without words. The valley was silent. The kind of silence that doesn't mean peace, but exhaustion. Smoke curled from broken stone. Shell casings glittered like cold raindrops in the dirt. The mountain air was sharp with the smell of gunpowder and burnt oil. The sun hadn't yet cleared the ridge, but its light was beginning to bleed across the horizon, thin, gold, uncertain. And somewhere on the eastern rocks, a single sniper lay motionless. Maya Rodriguez pressed her cheek against the cold scope one last time, scanning the field below. No movement, no return fire, just the aftermath of what used to be chaos. Her ears rang with the ghost of gunfire, a hollow echo that never really leaves soldiers who have survived too long in the noise. Her heartbeat was finally slowing, but her mind was. 31 shots. Each one calculated, deliberate, necessary. Each one a decision she would have to live with. She knew what came next, not celebration, not even relief, but the quiet reckoning after you've done something that changed lives. The SEALs below were regrouping now. She could see them moving, clearing the field, pulling wounded to cover. She wondered if any of them realized the shooter who'd saved them wasn't on their roster. She smiled faintly, not from pride but from disbelief. They'd called her Shadow Walker, and today that shadow had rewritten an ending. Maya eased the Barrett's bolt open, letting the spent casing slide into her gloved hand. She stared at it for a long second, then slipped it into her vest pocket, a reminder that sometimes the smallest fragments carry the heaviest stories. Wind tugged at her sleeve, carrying the faint echo of voices. The team was calling for extraction. She waited another 5 minutes before moving. Old sniper habit, never leave too soon. When she finally stood, her muscles screamed. 8 hours of crawling, climbing, and firing from prone positions had turned every joint into stone. Her knees buckled once before she caught herself. She looked down the mountain. The descent looked impossible, steep, slick with ice, jagged in places that hadn't seemed so sharp in darkness. But that was the mountain's trick. It always looked easier going up. Her radio crackled to life. Viper 7, air support inbound. Repeat, extraction choppers on approach. For a moment, she just listened, the distant thump of rotors approaching through the thin air. It was the sound every soldier prayed to hear and never forgot once they did. She made her way down slowly, one step at a time, letting the rifle balance her like an old friend. Halfway down, she paused, resting on a ledge. From here, she could see the seals signaling from the valley floor, small figures against the vast, scarred landscape. It hit her then, the magnitude of what she'd just done. Not in numbers, not in confirmed kills, but in meaning. She had broken protocol, lied over comms, and left her post. But she had done it for one reason: to stop that slow, helpless feeling that eats soldiers alive when they have to listen to their people die. Was it right? Maybe not. But necessary? Yes. Sometimes necessity doesn't wait for permission. The choppers came into view, two black hawks gliding through the thin morning mist. Their blades scattered dust and spent shell casings as they landed. The surviving seals moved quickly, efficient even in exhaustion. Maya reached the valley floor moments after them, boots heavy, rifle across her chest. No one noticed her at first. The chaos of extraction swallowed everything. Wounded were being lifted onto stretchers, medics shouting vitals, pilots checking time windows before enemy reinforcements regrouped. Then Martinez turned. For a long second, he just stared, sweat-streaked face, eyes squinting against the rotor wash. Recognition took a moment to land. The quiet Marine from comms, the one who had no combat orders, the one who had saved them all. He stepped forward slowly, like he was approaching something sacred. "Rodriguez," he shouted over the roar of the blades. She didn't answer, she just met his eyes. He didn't need her words. The rifle slung over her shoulder said everything. The wind whipped between them, carrying fragments of unspoken things: apology, awe, disbelief. Martinez tried to speak again, but his voice broke halfway through. You climbed that ridge alone." Maya nodded once. He let out a short, disbelieving laugh, the kind that comes not from humor, but from the shock of survival. "You're out of your damn mind." She gave the faintest smile. "Guess it runs in the family." He stared at her for another second, then shook his head with something like reverence. "Get in the bird, Corporal. You've earned your ride home." As she stepped onto the Black Hawk, something inside her shifted. The same soldiers who had ignored her for months now moved aside without a word. They didn't need an order to show respect. Sometimes, silence carries the loudest recognition. When the chopper lifted off, the world below blurred into a swirl of dust, rock, and fatting echoes. Maya looked down through the open side door, the valley shrinking beneath them. And then she saw it, the ridge where she'd made her stand. Just a line of stone now, ordinary, unremarkable, but to her it was something else entirely, the place where invisibility had become strength. Her hands trembled slightly, not from adrenaline now, but from the quiet aftermath of purpose fulfilled. The flight back to Firebase Alpha felt endless. No one spoke for the first 15 minutes. The SEALs sat across from her, faces bruised, eyes hollow but alive. One of them, young, maybe 25, kept staring at her rifle with a kind of haunted gratitude. He finally leaned closer, shouting over the rotor noise. "That was you up there." Maya hesitated, then gave a small nod. He just stared at her for a moment, then said softly, "Thank you." 2 words, simple, heavy, enough. She turned back toward the open door. The sun had finally risen, spilling gold light over endless mountains. For the first time since she joined the military, she didn't feel small beneath it. When they landed at the base, everything changed. Word travels fast in combat zones, faster than gunfire, faster than truth. By the time Maya stepped off the chopper, whispers had already begun weaving through the compound. A sniper had saved an entire SEAL team. A woman no one believed in had changed the outcome of an entire engagement. Personnel emerged from buildings, mechanics, medics, officers, all drawn by the kind of rumor that doesn't sound real until you see it with your own eyes. Maya walked across the tarmac, her uniform torn, streaked with dirt and blood, the Barrett rifle across her shoulder like an extension of herself. Her steps were steady, controlled, But her mind was miles away, still on that ridge, still hearing the echoes of the shots that had ended it all. Martinez approached her again, slower this time, as though unsure of what the right gesture was for a soldier who had rewritten every assumption he'd made. He stopped a few feet away. The rotor wash died down. For the first time, there was only silence between them. "Rodriguez," he began, voice low, rough from hours of shouting. "I don't know what to say." "You don't have to," she said. He shook his head. "Yeah, I think I do." He looked at the dirt for a moment, then back at her. "We mocked you, dismissed you, and when everything went to hell, you're the one who saved us. I've been in combat 15 years. I've never seen anything like what you did up there." Maya's expression didn't change. "You've seen plenty, Sergeant, just not through a woman's scope." The words weren't sharp, just honest. He nodded slowly, absorbing it, then extended his hand. It wasn't a handshake of protocol, it was something quieter, raw, human. She took it. For a long second, neither spoke. Then a voice behind them interrupted the moment. "Attention on deck." Colonel Harrison, base commander, stepped out from the hangar. His uniform was immaculate despite the early hour. His presence alone could silence an entire room. Maya straightened automatically. Martinez snapped to attention beside her. Harrison's gaze lingered on her rifle, then on her face. "I've read the report," he said. 31 confirmed enemy kills, all from that ridge." Maya said nothing. He took a step closer. "Your assigned duty was communications, rear security. You abandoned post, disobeyed direct protocol." Her heartbeat quickened, but her eyes didn't waver. "Yes, sir." "Why?" She inhaled slowly. "Because my team was dying, sir, and no one else was in position to stop it." A pause stretched between them, the kind of silence that holds judgment on one side and conviction on the other. Finally, Harrison nodded once, understood. He straightened, voice carrying across the tarmac. "What you accomplished last night will be studied in tactical manuals for years to come. You took an impossible shot, no, 31 of them, and saved 24 men who had already written their own eulogies." Around them, the air shifted. Soldiers who'd gathered nearby went still. Then, in an act that stunned every witness into silence, Colonel Harrison raised his right hand and saluted. It wasn't just a salute to rank. It was to courage that doesn't wait for permission. Maya returned it, her spine straight, eyes clear. The colonel's voice softened. "Sometimes doing your duty means redefining it." When he lowered his hand, she did too, but something invisible had changed forever. No one called her Shadow Walker after that. That name belonged to the version of her they'd refused to see. Now she was simply Rodriguez. A Marine. A sniper. A reminder that silence is not weakness, and invisibility is not absence. As the crowd slowly dispersed, Martinez lingered behind. He watched her walk toward the barracks, the rising sun cutting across her silhouette. He didn't say a word, he didn't need to. Because sometimes the loudest recognition comes not from ceremony, but from the quiet between two soldiers who finally understand each other. And as the bass returned to its rhythm, engines humming, boots echoing on concrete, radios crackling with new orders, one thought lingered in every mind that had witnessed what happened that morning. Courage isn't always loud. Sometimes it's a whisper on a mountain, steady, unseen and unshakable. They said heroes sleep easy after the fight. Whoever said that never held a rifle that had taken 31 lives. Maya Rodriguez sat alone in the barracks that night, her rifle propped carefully against the wall, barrel down, bolt open, cleaned twice already, though she hadn't fired it since dawn. The metal still smelled faintly of oil and dust. She could feel the weight of it from across the room. Outside, the base was alive with the low rhythm of recovery, choppers landing, boots on gravel, muted laughter from soldiers too, relieved to process what survival meant. Inside, silence pressed against her like gravity. Her body was exhausted, but her mind refused to rest. Every time she closed her eyes, the valley returned, flashes of light, echoes of gunfire, faces turning toward her invisible protection. And beneath it all, one question she couldn't quiet. What did it cost? Command had called it a miracle. The SEALs had called it a rescue. But Maya knew better. Every miracle in combat comes with a price someone has to pay. A knock broke the silence. "Come in," she said softly. The door creaked open. Martinez stepped in, still in dusty fatigues, his expression uncertain, a mix of pride and guilt. "Couldn't sleep?" he asked. "Could you?" He smiled weakly, didn't even try. He lingered at the doorway, then sat across from her, elbows on knees, the weight of shared silence between them. "They're calling it the Rockshot engagement," he said finally. "Command's already drafting reports. They're saying it'll be used for sniper training, case study on improvised Overwatch tactics." Maya didn't respond. Her hands were clasped tight in her lap, knuckles white. "They also said," he continued, "Colonel Harrison's nominating you for commendation. Navy Cross, maybe Silver Star." Her eyes flickered up. "For disobeying orders." Martinez hesitated. "For saving 24 lives." Maya looked down again. Her voice was quiet, almost detached. "Those two things aren't always the same." He exhaled slowly. "You did what had to be done." "Did I?" she said, finally looking at him. "Or did I just decide I knew better than the people giving orders?" He shook his head. "If you hadn't, we'd all be names on a wall right now." She didn't argue, but her expression didn't ease either. Because beneath the surface of relief, she carried something heavier, the understanding that sometimes doing the right thing leaves scars that don't heal with medals. After Martinez left, she sat there for hours, watching dawn slip across the barracks window. The sun crawled slowly across the rifle's metal surface, catching the scratches she hadn't been able to buff out. It glinted like memory, sharp, brief, unignorable. By morning, command summoned her. The base's operations office was colder than the mountain air. Files stacked neatly, screens humming with static maps. Colonel Harrison stood behind the desk, arms folded, a presence that filled the room like pressure. "Corporal Rodriguez," he began, "you're aware of the formal investigation that follows any unsanctioned field action." "Yes, sir." He gestured toward a seat. "Sit." She did. Across the table, a recorder light blinked red. Beside it sat a legal officer, expression unreadable, pen poised. Harrison's voice was even, almost kind. "We're not here to punish initiative, but we are here to understand it. Walk me through it, from the moment you decided to leave your position." Maya met his gaze. "Sir, I didn't decide, I reacted. My team was pinned, no Overwatch, no air support. I had the coordinates and I had the shot. That was all I needed." "Your orders were to remain in communications." "Yes, sir, they were." "Yet you left your post, without authorization, and climbed into an unassigned sector." "Yes, sir." Harrison studied her for a long moment. "You understand what that means, Corporal?" "I do, sir. It means I broke procedure." "Why?" She hesitated, not from fear, but from honesty, trying to find words. "Because procedure doesn't bleed," she said quietly. "People do." The colonel's expression softened almost imperceptibly. "And you believed you could save them." "I didn't know if I could," she said. "I just knew I couldn't listen to them die." Silence followed. The legal officer's pen didn't move. Harrison leaned back, eyes thoughtful. "When I was a lieutenant," he said slowly, "I watched a sergeant disobey a direct order to retreat, saved 9 men, lost 2. He never forgave himself for the 2. The rest of us never forgot the 9. He paused. You remind me of him. Maya didn't know how to respond, so she didn't. Finally, Harrison reached across the table and stopped the recorder. The red light died. Off the record, he said, voice lower now. You did something remarkable out there, but I need to ask you one thing, not as your commanding officer, but as someone who's seen what war does to people who act alone. He leaned forward. Can you live with what you did? The question landed harder than any reprimand could. Maya looked down at her hands. There were small cuts along her fingers, rock scrapes from the climb. Blood had dried into the lines of her skin, faint but stubborn. I can live with saving them, she said softly. I don't know if I can live with how it felt. Harrison nodded, slow and grave. Then take time, breathe. You'll be debriefed again before redeployment. When she left his office, the base felt different. Not colder, just quieter. Soldiers she barely knew were nodding at her in passing silent acknowledgement. A medic smiled at her near the mess hall, eyes full of gratitude he didn't voice. Recognition felt strange, almost foreign. For so long, invisibility had been her armor. Now, exposure felt like vulnerability. Later that day, while most of the base ate dinner, she walked out to the rifle range. The wind had picked up, sharp, dry, restless. Targets swayed slightly downrange. She set up at the farthest lane, lay prone, and sighted in. Her first shot rang out like a memory, clean, controlled. But as she cycled the bolt, something felt different, heavier. The echo wasn't just sound, it was reflection. Every sniper learns early that the rifle is honest. It tells you when your hands are uncertain. It mirrors your state of mind more than your aim. That night, her hands weren't steady. She lowered the rifle, sat back, watched the horizon fade. Behind her, footsteps approached, slow, familiar. Didn't think I'd find you here, Martinez said, stopping a few feet away. Didn't think I'd be here either. He dropped down beside her, resting his forearms on his knees. They're redeploying us to Kunar in 2 days. Harrison wants you on Overwatch, officially this time. Maya blinked. You're serious? As a heart attack, he grinned faintly. Guess disobedience looks good in a report when it saves everyone. She gave a dry laugh, short, reluctant. Guess so. Then, after a pause, her voice dropped lower. Do they know what that means, Martinez? Putting me back up there. They think it's just aim and calm hands, but it's everything else too. He nodded slowly. I know. Silence again, but this one wasn't awkward. It was understanding. Martinez picked up a shell casing from the dirt and turned it between his fingers. You know, he said, we were calling you Shadow Walker before. Figured it was funny. Maya smirked. It was. He laughed softly. Yeah, now it's something else. Word going around. SEALs, Rangers, Recon, they're all talking about the ghost on the ridge. She looked at him. The what? That's what they're calling you now, he said. Ghost on the ridge. She shook her head, almost amused. I didn't do it for that. I know, but sometimes legends don't ask permission either. He stood, brushed the dust from his pants, and offered her a hand. She didn't take it right away. Her gaze stayed on the distant targets, the ones she'd left untouched. I'm not sure I want to be a legend, she said. Then be what you were before, he replied. A Marine who does what needs doing. She finally took his hand and stood. They walked back toward the lights of the base, 2 silhouettes against the fading sky. And as they moved, Maya felt something shift inside her again. Not peace, not pride, just acceptance. The kind that comes when you realize survival isn't about glory, it's about purpose. Later that night, she wrote a short letter, unsigned, unaddressed. She tucked it into her footlocker, beside her grandfather's old compass and the casing from her first shot that morning. The letter read, To whoever finds this, sometimes courage doesn't look like what you've been told. It's not in shouting or medals or orders followed. It's in the moment you choose not to look away when everyone else does. If you ever doubt your place, remember the ridge. The world may not see you coming, but the shot that matters will. She closed the locker and sat back on her bunk, eyes tracing the faint cracks in the ceiling. The generator hummed softly in the distance. Outside, the wind moved through the valley, whispering across the mountains like a quiet echo of her name. And somewhere deep in her, she knew this wasn't the end of her story. It was just the first time the world had finally heard her speak, without a single word. They said she was a ghost now, but ghosts don't get reassigned. 2 weeks after the engagement in the mountains, Marine Corporal Maya Rodriguez found herself starring at new orders. Redeployment, Kunar Province. Mission Overwatch Detail Operation Iron Wake. Duration, indefinite. Her name, once at the bottom of lists, invisible between logistics and supply, now carried weight. Every officer who read it seemed to pause a little longer. Every glance she caught came with quiet recognition. For the first time in her career, Maya wasn't just part of a team. She was the name whispered before briefings. The one soldiers mentioned in passing like a lucky charm, "We've got the ghost on our flank. We'll be fine." She hated it. The thing about legends is, they forget the person inside them. To everyone else, she was precision and composure, the calm eye of chaos. But inside, she hadn't slept more than 3 hours a night since that day in the mountains. Every time she shut her eyes, the echo of her own rifle chased her awake. She told herself it was fine, that nightmares were just memories still trying to understand themselves. But deep down, she knew better. Heroism has a cost, and sometimes it's collected in silence. The new team met her at the forward operating base 3 days later, an Army recon detachment mixed with a few Marines from her old unit. Their commanding officer, Captain Reeves, greeted her with polite skepticism. "So you're the ghost," he said, shaking her hand. Maya returned the grip firmly. "I'm Rodriguez, sir. The ghost part's just noise." Reeves studied her, not unkindly, just trying to fit the myth to the person. "Well, noise or not, my men believe it. So let's make sure you live up to your legend, Corporal." She didn't answer, she didn't need to. Legends didn't interest her, results did. Their mission was simple, on paper. Provide overwatch during a 3-day search operation through mountain villages, suspected of harboring an insurgent commander. But Maya had learned that in Afghanistan, the difference between simple and suicidal could be one bad turn of wind. She checked her equipment methodically. Barrett M82, reassembled by hand. Range finder, spotting scope, extra magazines, each round hand-marked with wind correction data. And one photograph folded into her pocket. Her grandfather, smiling in that faded Polaroid from Colorado. She carried it into every deployment since boot camp, not for luck but for grounding, for memory. That night under low red light in the barracks, she ran her finger along the edge of the photo and whispered, "Still making them count, Grandpa." Outside, the desert wind howled softly through broken wire fences, the kind of sound that turns loneliness into company. The convoy rolled out before dawn. The landscape unfolded in shades of gold and dust, jagged peaks, narrow valleys, villages clinging to the edges of cliffs like stubborn memories. The kind of place where danger could hide behind any stone wall. Maya rode in the last vehicle, quiet as always, eyes scanning the terrain through the armored window. The men in front were talking, trading jokes, half-nervous laughter, that strange soldier ritual before things get real. She didn't join in. She never did. Reeves leaned toward her. "You always this quiet, Corporal." She looked at him, "Only when it matters." He nodded, "Good answer." By midday, they reached the observation ridge. From there, Maya could see everything, the village below, narrow alleys twisting between mud brick houses, smoke from morning fires curling into the pale sky. She set up position in the rocks, laid her rifle out, adjusted elevation. The wind was steady, perfect conditions. Reeves's voice came through comms. Overwatch confirmed visual. Visual confirmed, she replied. Multiple rooftops, 2 high-angle threats possible. Advise approach from south wall. Her tone was calm, professional, but inside she felt that old familiar weight settle in, the balance between detachment and responsibility. Every breath mattered. Every sightline could mean the difference between life and regret. For hours, nothing happened. Then movement. 2 figures slipped out of a doorway, rifles hidden beneath shawls. Maya tracked them through the scope, pulse steady. The sun reflected off one weapon's barrel. She exhaled, adjusted for drift and squeezed. The man fell silently. The second dropped the rifle and ran. Reeves's voice crackled. Confirmed threat down, proceeding with caution. Nice shot, Ghost. Name's Rodriguez, sir, she replied, eyes still on the scope. He laughed softly in her ear. Copy that, Rodriguez. By nightfall, the operation was declared a success. No friendly casualties. 2 insurgent scouts neutralized. 1 weapons cache recovered. But even small victories felt heavy. Back at base, while the others celebrated, Maya sat outside the perimeter fence, watching the stars rise. Out here, the sky felt endless, vast and clean and cruel. She thought about the men she'd shot that day, about the ones in the valley weeks before, about how distance didn't make killing easier, just quieter. Footsteps approached behind her. She didn't need to look to know who it was. Martinez again. He handed her a tin cup of coffee, sat beside her without a word. "You're not supposed to be here," she murmured. He shrugged. "Neither are you technically. You were supposed to stay in comms, remember." She smiled faintly. "Guess we both stopped listening." They sat there a long time, the desert night breathing around them. Finally, he asked, "You ever think about it? What happens after all this?" Maya took a slow sip. "After what?" "After the fight, after the ghosts." She stared into the darkness. "I think maybe there is no after, just what you carry forward." He nodded, understanding more than he said. The next morning, Command sent new intel. A high-value target moving through the same corridor they just cleared. The insurgent commander they'd been hunting for months. The mission shifted instantly. They were to intercept before nightfall. The convoy split. Reeves led the main force through the valley. Maya stayed behind on Overwatch, positioned 2 kilometers away, high on the western ridge. It was déjà vu, another mountain, another impossible angle, another moment between doubt and duty. Through her scope, she could see the convoy snaking through the ravine, armored trucks glinting under the morning light. Then movement in the rocks above them. Shadows, too many. Ambush. Her pulse spiked. She switched channels. "Reeves, this is Overwatch. You've got multiple hostiles on your 9 o'clock High Ridge, RPG teams. Repeat, multiple hostiles." Static, then copy that, taking fire, need cover now. Without hesitation, Maya adjusted position, range of finding through the shimmer of heat. First target, 890 meters. Wind 5 knots east. She fired. The RPG gunner folded before he could fire. Second target, 940 meters, moving fast. She shifted right, squeezed again, misadjusted, fired again, hit. The valley erupted below, gunfire, shouting chaos. But this time she wasn't a rumor, she was there. Reeves's voice broke through again. "Ghost, correction, Rodriguez, you're saving our asses again. Keep those heads down." Her voice came steady. "Working on it, sir." For 30 minutes, she rained precision into the valley, deliberate, unbroken rhythm. Every shot a line of defense, every pause a calculation between wind and will. When the last insurgent fell, the silence returned, heavy, familiar. Maya exhaled, pulling away from the scope. Her cheek left a faint mark on the metal, a bruise shaped like purpose. She heard Reeves over comms again, his voice low, almost reverent. You really are the ghost, you know that. She smiled tiredly, just a Marine doing her job. Yeah, he said, but some jobs rewrite the manual. That night the base held an informal debrief. Soldiers gathered around crates turned into tables, passing around coffee and stories. Maya sat on the edge, quietly observing. Every few minutes, someone would glance at her, that same mix of curiosity and respect she was still learning how to accept. She didn't crave the attention, but she understood what it meant. Sometimes soldiers need legends, not because they're true, but because they remind them that impossible doesn't always mean unachievable. As the laughter faded and the crowd thinned, Reeves approached her again. You know, he said, sitting down across from her, you could teach this. What you do up there, the calm, the patience, it's more than marksmanship. She tilted her head. What is it then? He thought for a moment. It's belief. You make the impossible look logical. She smiled faintly. It's not belief, Captain, it's acceptance. The mountain doesn't care what we believe. It only answers those who respect it. He chuckled softly. You sound like someone's grandfather. Her eyes softened. He'd like that. Later, in the dim light of her bunk, she opened her notebook. The one she'd started back in training, pages filled with range data, wind notes, sketches of terrain. She flipped to a clean page and wrote 3 words at the top. Still learning silence. Below it she added, because sometimes the loudest truths are the ones we carry alone. Then she closed it gently. Outside, the desert was still. Stars spread across the horizon like bullet holes in heaven. For the first time in weeks, she felt something that wasn't exhaustion or doubt. It wasn't pride either. It was peace, quiet, temporary, but real. Because tonight, no one was dying. No one was calling for help through a broken radio. And the only sound was the wind, whispering through the rocks like a voice that finally forgave her. She used to count bullets. Now she counted hours she couldn't sleep. 3 weeks after the Kunar engagement, the base was quiet again, too quiet. Operations had slowed, reports written, medals processed, debriefings finished. But for Maya Rodriguez, stillness wasn't peace. It was noise in disguise. She woke at 02:37 every night, same time, same dream. The mountain, the wind, the click before the first shot. And always the same face through her scope, not enemy, not stranger. Just a blur of humanity right before the impact. Sometimes she'd wake up gripping her blanket like a rifle. Sometimes her pulse would spike so hard she'd think the war had found her again in her sleep. No one noticed, or maybe no one asked. Legends aren't supposed to tremble. The day after her second commendation ceremony, she sat in the armory, disassembling her rifle for the 3rd time that morning. The weapon gleamed, flawless, oiled, patient. It didn't need the attention, but she did. Martinez appeared at the door, holding 2 coffees. You're gonna polish that thing to death, he said. She glanced up. It doesn't complain. He set the cup beside her. You haven't eaten in 2 days. Not hungry. He studied her for a moment, reading what she wasn't saying. You ever stop to think what you did was impossible? She gave a quiet smile. You mean lucky? I mean legendary. Her hands paused over the bolt assembly. That word again. He leaned against the wall. It's not going away, Maya. You saved more people than most of us could in 10 lifetimes. You earned it. She shook her head slowly. You don't earn ghosts, Martinez. You just live with them. He didn't argue. There was no point. Some truths don't need defense, just understanding. That evening, Command had scheduled a resilience seminar. Standard procedure, stress management for deployed personnel. Maya almost skipped it, but Reeves caught her outside the mess hall. Rodriguez, he called, falling into step beside her. I know it's not your thing, but show face, all right. Makes the others feel like even legends listen sometimes. She gave a small sigh. Yes, sir. The seminar was held in the recreation tent, folding chairs, a projector, a young psychologist from base command who looked too clean to understand dust and fear. Her voice was calm, practiced, textbook empathy. She talked about trauma, about moral injury, about the burden of responsibility under fire. Maya sat in the back, silent, fingers tapping against her thigh in rhythm with her pulse. Then the psychologist said something that made her still. Some soldiers, she said, develop what we call the savior's paradox. You save others but can't save yourself from the weight of it. The words hit harder than expected, not because they were new, but because they were true. When the session ended, Maya slipped out before anyone could stop her. The air outside was cold, sharp. She walked past the perimeter lights, beyond the noise of the base, until the ground turned to uneven rock. There she sat, the same way she always did when she needed to remember who she was before all this. In her mind she was back in Colorado. Snow, pine, her grandfather's steady voice. Stillness, Nieta, you find the wind, not fight it. She closed her eyes and listened. The mountain wind here was different, harsher, impatient, but if she listened long enough, she could almost hear him in it. Then she heard footsteps, Reeves this time. You planning to vanish completely, Rodriguez? He said quietly, crouching nearby. She opened her eyes, looked at the ground. Just needed air. He nodded. I get it. The quiet can be loud sometimes. She almost smiled. You've been reading those resilience slides. He chuckled softly. Maybe. Or maybe I've just been watching a Marine trying too hard to hold the sky up alone. Silence then. Command wants you stateside, he said. Training rotation. Quantico. They want to use your footage, your data, your tactics for sniper instruction. Her stomach sank. You mean desk work? Not exactly. More like passing on what you've learned. She stared into the dark horizon. What if I'm not done learning? Reeves's voice softened. Then teach anyway. Sometimes the only way to learn peace is to give someone else the tools to survive what you didn't. A month later, she was back on American soil. The first thing that struck her was the noise not of war but of normalcy. Airports, traffic, laughter, people arguing about coffee orders. It was a different kind of chaos, one that felt unreal after years of silence. Quantico was colder than she remembered. The classroom smelled like cleaning solvent and gun oil. The range, long, flat, too civilized. The mountains were gone, and with them, the rawness she'd trusted. She was assigned as an instructor, advanced precision engagement tactics, 20 cadets, mostly men, all eager. When she introduced herself, a few whispered her call sign under their breath, Ghost. She ignored it. Out there, she told them, packing slowly before the firing line, you don't get do-overs, you don't get applause, you get decisions that echo. One of the younger cadets, maybe 19, raised a hand. Ma'am, is it true you took a 1,300-meter shot uphill through crosswind? She paused, then nodded slightly. It's true. His eyes widened. How'd you keep your hands steady? Maya looked down the range where targets waited in the morning fog. You don't steady your hands, she said softly. You steady your purpose. The boy blinked, unsure if it was an answer or a lesson. Maybe both. Weeks turned into months. She taught, trained, advised. But something inside her remained unsettled, like a soldier still waiting for orders that never came. Her reputation spread. Military journals requested interviews. Command wanted her face on recruitment posters. She refused every offer. Heroes sell well, one public affairs officer said with a grin. Maya's reply was calm but sharp. Then sell someone else. She wasn't ungrateful. She just knew the truth no headline ever captured. The cost of 31 perfect shots wasn't courage. It was sleeplessness, guilt, and silence. Late one night, she found herself alone on the range again. Moonlight poured across the targets like pale memory. She set her rifle down, not to fire, just to feel it. She whispered, "You and me again, huh?" The weapon didn't answer, but it didn't have to. It had been her language long before words ever mattered. Then she heard a voice behind her. "Couldn't stay away, huh?" Martinez, again, visiting from a new deployment rotation. She smiled, "Guess not." He sat beside her on the shooting mat, quiet. "You know, they tell stories about you out there." "I've heard." "Not the official ones, the whispered ones." She tilted her head. "What kind?" "The kind that make rookies believe that maybe, just maybe, they can survive the impossible." She looked out toward the targets, white circles glowing faintly in the dark. "That's dangerous. Belief without understanding gets people killed." "Or it keeps them alive long enough to try," he said gently. Maya didn't argue. She couldn't, because maybe once belief had kept her alive too. A week later, she was called into a command meeting. Another operation needed consulting, same region, same terrain. They wanted her insight. As she studied the mission file, her throat tightened. Same valley, same coordinates. She exhaled slowly. "You're sending them into that ridge again." The colonel nodded. "It's strategic ground. We have new intel and new tech. We'll be fine." Maya looked at the satellite image, the rock formations, the narrow choke points. She remembered the smell of gunpowder, the echoes of dying comms. She slid the folder closed. "With respect, sir, that ridge doesn't forgive arrogance." The colonel studied her. "You think we shouldn't go?" She shook her head. "I think you should listen to the wind before you walk into it." It wasn't defiance. It was warning spoken in the only language she had left. He nodded slowly, understanding something unspoken. "We'll take your assessment under advisement." But as she left the room, she knew what that meant. They'd go anyway. They always did. That night she dreamed again. The same mountain, the same echo. But this time, the face in her scope wasn't an enemy. It was her own. She woke up with a start, sweat on her palms, pulse racing. She sat up, breathing hard, eyes scanning the dark room like it was hostile terrain. When her heart finally slowed, she whispered to the empty air, "I'm not her anymore." But part of her still was. The part that understood that some identities don't fade. They just learn how to stay silent. Weeks later, she stood at the base gate watching a convoy roll out, young soldiers, eager, fearless. Among them, one of her cadets, that 19-year-old who had once asked how to steady his hands. He saluted her through the window. She returned it, heart heavy. As the trucks disappeared into the dust, she whispered softly, "Make it count." The same words her grandfather had told her. The same ones that had followed her across every ridge, every mission, every sleepless night. She stayed there long after the dust had settled, alone again but not lonely. Because in that moment, she understood something she'd been chasing for months. You can't outrun what made you who you are, but you can choose what it makes you next. And maybe, just maybe, that was peace. Some ghosts don't haunt you. They just wait for the right silence to be heard again. Maya Rodriguez thought she had left the mountains behind. Months of training young snipers at Quantico had carved a rhythm she could live with: early mornings, steady breathing, the quiet satisfaction of teaching others to find calm where chaos waited. But the mountains had a way of calling back their own. It was a gray Virginia morning when the message came, a secure file marked eyes only. She opened it, expecting another training request. Instead, her breath stilled. Subject: Special Operations Assistance, Eastern Afghanistan. Operation: Red Halcyon. Status: High Risk. Requesting Officer: Captain J. Reeves. Her finger hovered over the next line. Advisory role optional. Field presence recommended. She leaned back in her chair, eyes fixed on the screen. Reeves. The same man who'd once told her legends didn't ask permission. The same man who now needed her back where her legend was born. For a long time she said nothing, then she whispered, "Of course it's him." The transport flight took 18 hours. Plenty of time to think, which was never a gift. She watched the clouds roll beneath the aircraft's wings, mind replaying the last conversation she'd had with Reeves before she left the field. "You'll come back," he'd said. "Not because you want to, because the quiet won't be enough forever." He'd been right. The world below shifted from soft horizon to brutal ridgelines. Afghanistan again. Sharp, cold, familiar. When the plane touched down at Bagram, the air felt thinner, as if the land itself remembered her. Soldiers moved with the mechanical rhythm of deployment, gear slung, orders exchanged, the unspoken awareness that tomorrow could be written in past tense. Maya stepped off the ramp. Dust hit her face like memory. Reeves was waiting near a Humvee, looking older, not in years, but in weight. "Didn't think you'd actually come," he said, a faint smile hiding exhaustion. "Neither did I," she replied. They stood there for a moment, the kind of silence between people who have seen each other at their worst and don't need to talk about it. Then Reeves handed her a folder. "Briefing," inside. "We've got a recon unit pinned in the Alakan corridor, 3 days overdue. Terrain's a nightmare, high cliffs, low cover. No comms, we're going in at dawn." Maya flipped through the file. Satellite images, grid coordinates, then she froze. The ridge. Same formation, same valley system, different name on paper, but she knew those rocks. "Reeves," she said quietly, "that's where it happened." He nodded. "I know. And you're still sending people there." His voice was low. "They were already there, we're getting them out." Maya closed the folder slowly. "Then you'll need someone who knows how the wind behaves in that place." He looked at her, not as a commander, but as a man asking for help from the one person who'd once defied impossible odds. "Then you're in?" he asked. She gave a slow nod. "Looks like the ghost is coming home." They left before sunrise. The convoy snaked through the valley in near silence, engines muted, lights low. Maya sat in the lead vehicle beside Reeves, watching the ridges rise around them like sleeping giants. Every shadow looked familiar. Every gust of wind carried echoes. She ran her fingers over the stock of her rifle, her Barrett, the same one she'd used on that first mission. The base had preserved it for historical display, but Reeves had pulled strings to bring it out again. It felt heavier than she remembered, or maybe she was just older in ways that didn't show. "Feels strange," Reeves said quietly. "What does?" "Coming back here with you, like the mountain, waiting to see if we learned anything." She glanced out the window. "Mountains don't care what we've learned, they just remind us what we've forgotten." By late afternoon, they reached the forward staging point, an abandoned outpost at the mouth of the valley. The team, 12 men, 1 woman, began unpacking gear, setting perimeters, prepping drones. Maya walked the perimeter alone. The air was sharp, colder than before. She crouched near a small rock formation, running her gloved hand across the stone. Faint scratches, not natural, bullet marks, old ones. She remembered where she'd been lying when she made her first shot. It was only 50 meters away. Time folds strangely in places like this. She stood scanning the ridge. The same wind still screamed through the gaps. The same silence waited behind it. That night they set up in rotations. Reeves handled comms. Maya went prone on the edge of the perimeter, her scope fixed on the darkness ahead. Hours passed, nothing but wind, then movement. A flicker, then another. She switched frequencies. "Reeves, we've got light signatures, North Ridge, could be them or hostiles." Static, then his voice. "Copy, hold your fire till confirmation." She adjusted magnification. The flickers became shapes, not soldiers but flares, distress signals, 3 spaced apart. Her pulse quickened. "Reeves, that's them. Pattern matches emergency protocol." "Copy, moving out." Within minutes, the team advanced careful, quiet, covering each angle. Maya stayed back, scanning through her scope, covering their movement. Then a sound she hadn't heard in a long time. The distinct whistle before a mortar lands. Incoming! The blast hit the valley floor like thunder. Dirt and rock exploded upward. Shouts filled the comms. Maya's scope shattered from debris, knocking her sideways. She rolled, grabbed her spare optic, reattached it with shaking hands. Her ears rang, but training took over. Through the dust, she saw movement, enemy silhouettes emerging from the ridge. Ambush again. Her breath steadied. Guardian Overwatch active, she said, voice firm. Reeves's reply was barely audible through static. Copy, Guardian, we're pinned. Coordinates 271. They've got elevation. Maya scanned upward. Multiple muzzle flashes, high ground. She adjusted her rangefinder. 1,100 meters. Wind north by northeast, 8 knots. She fired. One down, adjusted, fired again. Another down. Her focus narrowed. The world outside the scope vanished. Only breath, distance, and time remained. She shifted position, crawling 10 meters right, using debris for cover. The mountain wind howled, threatening her balance. Below, Reeves's team moved under her covering fire, dragging wounded into cover. Every shot she fired was seconds they gained. She hit 12 targets before the barrel began to heat. Her shoulder ached, but she ignored it. The rifle kicked like a memory she'd never forgotten how to absorb. Then she saw it, an RPG team setting up on the far ridge. She adjusted, calculated the drop, fired, missed, wind shift, corrected. The second shot landed true. Explosion. Echoes rolled across the valley like old ghosts waking up. Reeves's voice broke through again, closer this time. We've got survivors. 5 men, 2 wounded. Extraction in 5 minutes. Keep them off us. She fired again, and again. Her last magazine nearly empty. Each round was its own heartbeat, its own decision. When the choppers finally came, she didn't stop firing until the last shadow disappeared into the storm of rotor wash. Only then did she lower her rifle. Her body shook not from exhaustion but from the flood of memory. She was back there again, 8 months ago, lying on cold rock, doing the impossible. Reeves approached through the smoke, face streaked with dust and relief. "You did it again," he said hoarsely. She didn't answer. She just looked up at the ridge, at the place where it had all started. "No," she said finally, "we did." Hours later, as the medevac helicopters lifted off, Reeves found her sitting alone at the edge of the landing zone, watching the sunrise burn the horizon. "You all right?" he asked softly. She smiled faintly. "You always ask that. And you never answer." She nodded toward the sky, because some questions don't need words. Reeves crouched beside her. "You know, back at HQ they'll write another report, another medal, another headline. Ghost saves another team." Maya exhaled slowly. "They can call it whatever they want. I just wanted them home." He studied her. "You think you'll ever stop coming back?" Her eyes stayed on the horizon. "You can't stop coming back to the place that taught you who you are. You just learn how to leave differently." Reeves nodded. He understood. They sat there as the light grew, painting the ridges gold. The wind was softer now, as if the mountain itself had exhaled. For the first time, Maya didn't feel haunted by the valley. She felt part of it, like the land had finally accepted her as more than a survivor. Reeves stood, brushing dust from his gear. "You heading back stateside after this?" She smiled slightly. "Maybe, or maybe I'll stay and teach again, somewhere quiet." He grinned. "You quiet." She chuckled softly. "You'd be surprised what silence can say when you finally listen." As the choppers faded into the distance, she picked up her rifle one last time. The metal was warm from the morning sun. She looked at it not as a weapon but as a witness. Then she slung it over her shoulder and began the walk back down the mountain. Each step was steady, measured, each breath lighter than the last. Because this time, the mountain wasn't a battlefield. It was closure. And somewhere behind her, the echoes of 31 shots and every one since finally began to fade into the wind. They said the mountain finally slept after that day. But it wasn't the mountain that needed rest. It was her. Maya Rodriguez returned to Quantico 6 weeks later. Same hallways, same smell of oil and cordite. Different silence. The world called her a hero now, newspapers, internal memos, recruitment reels. But when people said thank you, she never quite knew what to do with her hands. Because what do you do with gratitude for something that still wakes you at 3 a.m.? She walked the ranges again, slower this time. Students straightened when she passed, whispering her name like a password to courage. She pretended not to notice, but she always did. And every whisper reminded her how thin the line was between admiration and misunderstanding. In the instructor's office one morning, she found a small envelope on her desk. No return name, just a note inside, handwritten in careful, nervous script. "Ma'am, my brother was in that valley. He made it home because of you. I just enlisted. I want to learn from the ghost. Private Ryan Hale." She sat with the letter for a long while. The words weren't loud, but they carried more weight than any medal. Later that day, when she introduced herself to a new class of cadets, her voice was quieter than usual. "I'm Staff Sergeant Rodriguez," she began. "You'll hear stories. Don't believe the easy ones. Precision isn't glory. It's responsibility. Out there, every shot has a name on it, and it's your job to know whose it is." A hush fell over the room. No one moved. Then she smiled faintly. "All right, let's start with breathing, the first weapon you ever control." Weeks slipped by. Her days became rhythm again, instruction, reflection, silence. But peace was not the absence of memory. It was learning how to live beside it. At night she still woke sometimes. But now, instead of reaching for a rifle, she reached for a pen. She began to write not reports, not ballistics, but fragments. Thoughts, little truths that had kept her alive. Courage isn't pulling the trigger, it's knowing when not to. Discipline is the love language of survival. The wind is never your enemy. It's the part of the world that still wants to be felt. She never showed the pages to anyone. Not yet. One evening after class, she noticed a cadet staying behind on the range, the young private from the letter, Ryan Hale. He was struggling, pulling shots low, jaw tight, eyes angry at himself. Maya approached quietly, watching his form. "Wind's pushing left," she said. He startled. "Ma'am, I adjusted." "I know, you adjusted for the air," she said softly. "Not for your breathing. You're fighting it instead of timing with it." He blinked. I don't want to mess up. Not after what my brother told me." She crouched beside him, voice low. "Listen to me. The bullet isn't your brother. The mountain isn't your enemy. You're not here to repeat what I did. You're here to understand why you shouldn't have to." He swallowed hard. "Yes, ma'am." "Try again." He exhaled, squeezed, fired. Center hit. She smiled. "Better, now stop apologizing to the target." A small laugh escaped him, the kind that breaks tension more than humor. When she walked away, she heard him whisper under his breath, "Thank you, Ghost." She didn't correct him this time. Some names you earn once, and then learn to carry quietly. Months later, command called her into an auditorium filled with recruits and officers. She thought it was another lecture assignment. It was. On the stage stood Colonel Harrison, same steely composure, same eyes that had once looked at her across a desk filled with questions. But this time he smiled. "Staff Sergeant Rodriguez," he said, "it's been decided that your field recordings and data will be included in the advanced marksmanship curriculum." But more importantly, you will head the new Silent Resolve program. Its focus, emotional resilience under combat isolation. She hesitated. You want me to teach silence? He nodded. Who better? The room erupted in applause. Maya stood still, the sound washing over her like wind through trees, loud, alive, but not hers to keep. Later, Harrison pulled her aside. I read one of your notes, he said quietly. The part about courage and restraint. It's beautiful, Rodriguez. She smiled faintly. Those weren't meant to be read. Then they should be, he replied. The Corps needs voices that whisper truth, not shout slogans. For the first time, she didn't resist the idea. Weeks later, she began building the program. She called it the Still Line. Because every sniper, every soldier, every human being who's ever faced chaos needs one moment of stillness to aim from, whether it's a trigger or a choice. Her students learned breathing, awareness, emotional containment. But she added something new, reflection. Before every live fire, she made them write down one question. Why are you here? And one promise. Who will you come home to? Some grumbled. Some rolled their eyes. But months later, she saw the same cadets staring at those papers before every shot, breathing differently, thinking before acting. It worked. Quiet changes rarely look like revolutions, but they are. One afternoon, Martinez visited the range unannounced, gray in his beard now, still smiling like he carried secret chaos he'd made peace with. Thought I'd find you buried in reports, he said. I buried the rifle instead, she replied, half smiling. He watched her instruct from a distance, nodding with pride. You know they talk about you everywhere. Some call you a myth, some call you a teacher. Either way, you changed things. She looked at the cadets adjusting their scopes. No, I reminded them to breathe. He laughed softly, same difference. They stood together, watching the line of shooters take aim. Each shot rang like punctuation in a story that was still being written. After a while he asked, You ever miss it, the field? She considered. Sometimes not the fight, the focus, the purity of it. Up there, everything falls away. And down here. She smiled. Down here you learn to live with the echoes. That night, alone in her quarters, she opened her old notebook, the one filled with fragments. She tore out a page and began a new entry, slower this time. There's no such thing as ghosts. Only memories with perfect aim. We don't escape them. We learn to let them guide us without pulling the trigger again. She placed the note in a folder marked Legacy Curriculum, Year 1. Then she took the casing from her pocket, the same one she'd kept from her first shot. She set it on her desk beside a photograph of her grandfather. Two symbols, the beginning and the reason. For the first time in years, she felt something settle. Not closure. Understanding. Months later, spring sunlight spilled across the Quantico fields. Graduation day. Her first class of cadets stood in uniform rows, faces young and proud. When her name was called for the address, the crowd hushed. She walked to the podium, steady, composed. Her speech wasn't long. It didn't need to be. Most of you joined to prove something, she began. To your families, your friends, yourselves. But the truth is, the world doesn't need more people who prove. It needs people who protect. Not just lives, but meaning. Every mission you walk into will test what kind of protector you are. Remember, the loudest act of courage you'll ever make might be the one no one sees. Sometimes dignity doesn't speak. It simply acts. Silence filled the field when she finished. Not applause at first, just breath, collective and deep. Then slowly, hands came together, not roaring but resonant, like the echo of a distant shot finding its mark. That evening, when the crowd had gone, she walked alone to the range. The sun hung low, orange on the horizon. She lay prone one last time, looking through the scope at targets she didn't plan to hit. The wind touched her cheek, familiar and forgiving. For a moment, she heard her grandfather's voice again. "Make it count, Nieta." She smiled, "I did." Then she closed her eyes, pulled away from the scope, and whispered to the quiet field. "Thank you." Not to anyone in particular, to all of it. The noise, the silence, the weight, the lesson. When she stood, the wind carried her whisper across the field like a secret passed from one generation to the next. And somewhere beyond the horizon, where mountains met sky, a story once born from gunfire finally rested in peace. They said legends fade, but some don't. Some just grow quieter until they become part of the air itself. Years passed. The world moved on, as it always does, new names, new missions, new wars. But within the halls of Quantico, within the whispered stories that traveled from one class to the next, the name Rodriguez still lingered. Not as the ghost, not as the sniper from the ridge, but as something rarer, a standard. She never asked for it, but legends rarely ask permission before they begin. It had been nearly 5 years since her last mission. Her hair was shorter now, streaked faintly with silver near the temples, the kind that comes not from age, but from seeing too much wind, too much dawn. Her uniform bore no new medals, just the same 3 ribbons polished by time. She had been offered promotion twice, major, then lieutenant colonel. She turned both down. "Titles create distance," she'd told the review board, "and I've spent my whole life closing it." Instead, she stayed on as lead instructor for the Still Line, her program for combat resilience and moral clarity under pressure. It had grown beyond snipers now. Infantry, medics, pilots, even intelligence officers came through her sessions. Because somewhere along the way, people realized that what Maya taught wasn't just about warfare. It was about survival of the self. One morning, a new batch of trainees arrived. Among them, a young woman named Alyssa Kane. Sharp eyes, steady voice, the kind of calm that made Maya pause. During introductions, Alyssa spoke simply. "My father was part of Viper 7, she said. "The SEAL team you saved, ma'am." The room went silent. Even years later, the name of that mission still carried weight. Maya met her gaze. "He make it home." Alyssa nodded. "He did. He still talks about the woman who fired from the rocks, said she taught him that silence could be the loudest sound in a storm." Maya's lips curved softly. "He was wrong about one thing." Alyssa blinked. "What's that, ma'am?" "I didn't fire from the rocks," Maya said gently. "I fired with them. The mountain doesn't help you, it tests you. Remember that." The class didn't fully understand. Not yet, but they would. Later that night, Maya found herself alone again on the range. The air smelled of rain and dust. The same wind, years later, still traced the same invisible lines through the air. She lay down with her rifle, not to shoot but to remember. The scope was clear, but her eyes weren't looking for targets anymore. She was looking for the parts of herself she had left behind in that valley so long ago. She thought about the faces, Martinez, Reeves, Harrison, her cadets, the lives saved and the ones lost. She thought about the letter she'd once written and never mailed. And for the first time, she wasn't haunted by it. She was grateful for it. Because the ghosts she once carried weren't burdens anymore. They were markers of proof that she had lived exactly where she was meant to. A week later, she was invited to speak at the National Sniper Symposium, a gathering of veterans, analysts, and active operators. She almost refused. Crowds weren't her comfort zone. But Reeves, now retired, sent her a single-line message. "If you don't tell your story, someone else will, and they'll get it wrong." She went. When she stepped on stage, the lights were blinding. The crowd was full, uniforms, suits, civilians. Some had ribbons, some had scars, All were waiting for the ghost. She adjusted the mic, took a breath, and said softly, "I'm not a ghost." The room went silent. "I'm just a Marine who didn't listen when they told me not to climb." A ripple of laughter, small, respectful. She continued, her voice calm, deliberate. "Everyone asks about those 31 shots, about what it felt like. The truth is, I don't remember the shots. I remember the silence before them, the sound of decision. The second between fear and duty, that's where courage lies." She paused, scanning the room. People think heroism is loud. It's not. It's quiet. It's the moment you act because doing nothing would cost someone else their tomorrow. That's all it ever was. Her words weren't rehearsed. They didn't need to be. They came from the place beyond rank and training, the place only those who have faced themselves truly understand. She ended with the same line she'd written years ago in her notebook. Sometimes dignity doesn't speak, it simply acts. The applause was slow at first, then it built, not wild, not thunderous, but deep. The kind of sound that comes from people who know the truth when they hear it. Afterward, as the crowd dispersed, a young journalist approached her, nervous, clutching a recorder. "Ma'am," he said, "what would you say to people who think your story is about heroism?" She smiled faintly. "Tell them it's about humility. Heroism ends when the gunfire stops. Humility is what you live with after." He hesitated, and the name Ghost on the Ridge. Her smile deepened. Ghosts only linger when they have something left to say. I think mine said enough. That night she packed her few belongings, old medals, her grandfather's compass, the casing from that first shot. Her orders were voluntary now, retirement papers waiting on her desk. She signed them without ceremony. The next morning, she took one final walk across the field where she'd spent her last 5 years teaching silence. Her students had left small things behind, handwritten notes, range cards, coins. She didn't take any of them. Some things belong to the ones who are still learning. At the gate, Martinez was waiting. Still smiling that same half-smile, still her anchor in a sea of past lives. "So this is it?" he asked. "For me, yeah," she said. "For them, it's just the beginning." He nodded toward the horizon. "Where will you go?" She looked east. "Home, Colorado. There's a cabin near the tree line. I think the mountains there might still remember me." He chuckled. "You'll miss this." She glanced back at the base. "No, I'll remember it, that's better." They shook hands, firm, quiet, the kind that says thank you without words. Then she walked away. No parade, no music, just the sound of her boots on gravel. Months later, the cabin was exactly as she remembered it. Wood-worn smooth, the air thin and crisp. A view of endless peaks, patient, eternal. She lived simply, coffee at dawn, long hikes, pages of writing that no one else would read. Sometimes she'd take her rifle outside and aim at the horizon, not to shoot, but to feel alignment again. One evening, as the sun slipped behind the peaks, she heard tires crunching on gravel. A truck. She stepped outside. It was Alyssa Kane. Older now, sergeant stripes on her sleeve. Maya smiled, didn't expect visitors this far out. Alyssa grinned, didn't expect you to answer, they said you don't like company. I like quiet company. They sat on the porch, 2 generations of soldiers watching the sky darken. I wanted to tell you, Alyssa said, I finished the program, the still line, and I'm teaching it now overseas. Maya's eyes softened. You're passing it on. Yes, ma'am, the breathing, the questions, the silence. Maya smiled. Then you've learned it right. Alyssa hesitated. There's one thing I never understood. You said once that the wind isn't the enemy. What did you mean? Maya looked out toward the valley below, the wind rustling through pine needles. It means, she said softly, the world will always move around you. Try to control it and you'll fight forever. Learn to move with it and you'll never miss your mark. Alyssa nodded slowly, memorizing every word. When she left, Maya watched the truck disappear into the dusk. Then she turned back toward the mountain. The air was still now calm, forgiving. And for the first time in decades, she let herself breathe without measuring the wind. The next morning, the sun rose over the ridge, the same ridge that once decided her fate. She stood at the porch railing, a mug of coffee in hand, the rifle leaning quietly against the wall. Somewhere in the distance, an eagle called sharp, clean, alive. Maya smiled. There would be no more missions, no more briefings, no more echoes. Just peace, quiet, earned, deserved. And if the wind ever carried her name again through the valleys of that faraway country, it would not be as a ghost, but as a whisper, a reminder that courage was never about the trigger. It was about the choice to see, to act, and to endure. Because in the end, legends don't last, but what they stand for does. And in that quiet cabin at the edge of the world, beneath the endless hum of mountain wind, one truth lingered. Soft, steady, final. Sometimes dignity doesn't speak. It simply acts.